Hello and welcome to the Pivot Leadership Podcast. I'm Emma Chandler and I'm excited to have you here today as we explore the science of leadership, dive into how the brain works and hopefully learn a few things that will transform the way you lead. I created the Pivot framework to help leaders change their work environments for the better by harnessing the power of neuroscience. Whether you're guiding your team through change or looking to elevate your own leadership game, this podcast is designed to help you unlock the next level of success. So what does it mean to pivot? Well, it's all about mastering perseverance, inclusion, value, optimization, and trust. These 5 principles are the building blocks of leadership that lasts. Throughout this podcast, I'll be joined by inspiring guests as we unpick each of these competencies and share actionable insights on how to apply them. So lean in, get ready to lead, pivot, and unlock your potential. On today's episode, we're discussing inclusion. Every leader should aim to create an environment of involvement, respect, and connection. It is important to examine leaders' ability to demonstrate inclusive leadership and how well they create communities rather than cultures. To discuss all things inclusion in the workplace, I am joined by Craig Thompson, founder of Vibrant Talent. Craig founded Vibrant in 2015 out of a deep sense of frustration with the working world. He's worked across a lot of different industries in a wide variety of roles and lived in 4 different countries. After seeing the system, both from the eyes of the employee and the eyes of an employer, trying to attract, develop and retain staff, it was clear to him that the world of work is broken. So Craig is on a mission to fix it, and I can't wait to hear more about this. Welcome to the Pivot Podcast, Craig. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me on, Emma. This is my first time as a guest, so I'm looking forward to experiencing this one. I'm usually the host, so I'll get to see things from the other side today.
I'm loving that. I'm absolutely loving this exclusive for the Pivot Podcast. So can you tell us a bit more about Vibrant and the work that you do?
So it all comes from, as you mentioned there, my own deep frustration with the working world and the whole model that we have for living and working as a species. Back in 2014, I used to work in a contact center where I was responsible for all the recruitment and all the talent development. And I just seemed to spend my life hiring people, training them up, watching them leave, hiring their replacement, training them up, watching them leave, rinse and repeat. And it used to drive me crazy. I used to be just so snowed under all the time with constant recruitment cycles, constant induction cycles. And I thought, this is such a dumb way to run a business. It costs us so much money to do this. I remember sitting down one time and working out that to go through a recruitment drive was costing 12 grand. We were in a recruitment cycle all the time. That was 12 grand, 12 grand, 12 grand, 12 grand. And I thought, this is ridiculous. Why don't we just fix some of the problems that we've got here and actually we'll keep our staff because they'll want to be here. They'll come to work more often. They'll perform better when they're in work. They'll delight our customers, our service users. They'll come back to us and use our services more often. We will be a more profitable business because people will stay in the company and we won't constantly be spending all that money on recruitment and on mistakes, because when you're constantly replacing people, you're bringing new people in who don't know how to do the job as well as their predecessor. And in the time it takes them to get up to speed, they make mistakes that cost us money. So from a business point of view, this was driving me insane. Okay. And I remember on the day that I handed in my resignation, I didn't know when I went to work that day that that's what I was going to do. For a very, very long time, I had been resentful of the company that I worked in and also other companies, to be honest with you, because I felt like so many people have a miserable experience of work. And I don't think that's right. I don't think people should have such a poor experience of work. I remember coming across a stat that said that a full-time worker will go to work for about 100,000 hours, or I'll adapt that because with my Northern Ireland accent, people always go, hours, what's that? 100,000 hours, okay, of their lives. And all I could think was, if someone's going to dedicate that amount of their life to their work, then they're going to work more than anything else that they will do in their conscious waking lifetime.
Yeah.
They'll spend more time probably with their coworkers than with their family. And I just thought, if they're going to do that, they deserve as a minimum to have a positive experience of the work that they do and to be looked after by their employer. And as I looked around me, both in the company where I worked in, but also at lots of other companies where friends and family members were working, I thought people are just a number. They're treated with such disregard in so many organizations. On the business level, that doesn't actually make any sense. It made my life much more difficult trying to attract people to come and join that company and trying to get them to stay, but actually on a human level as well. And I think that people, when they come to work, they deserve respect, they deserve dignity, they deserve to be looked after, and their work must make a positive contribution to their life, or they shouldn't be doing it. And therefore, on that day in 2014, I had locked myself away in a little boardroom to try and work out. I had 63 people to assess for jobs across the next 3 days. And I thought, how the heck am I going to do this over the next 3 days on my own? And instead, I wrote my letter of resignation. I just sat there and I thought, I don't want to be part of this broken model anymore. It doesn't work for employers, it doesn't work for employees, and it's not good for society. So I left. And I went
Wow.
on a bit of a soul searching journey at that point. To come back to your original question, where did Vibrant come from? I didn't initially have a plan for Vibrant. I just couldn't stomach being part of that system, that model anymore. I felt like businesses can make more money by looking after their people. So I'm not anti capitalist. I think they can be more profitable by looking after their people, and people can have better lives. I, at the time, thought I was going to go and work somewhere else, but I went for interviews in lots of different companies, and I just got that same sense, that same feeling of dread
The same
everywhere where I
wheel,
went.
yeah.
And ultimately, I ended up randomly in Barcelona. I had a couple of friends who were living and working in Spain. And they said to me, look, why don't you take this as an opportunity to come over here? We'll get you an interview in the company that we're working in. I went for that interview. I had that interview. I got offered the job. I took the job. And it was the exact same thing. I literally arrived into that business. They had made all their trainers redundant just before I joined. So I arrived on day one and it was like nobody knew that I was coming. I sat there for 3 days. Nobody came anywhere near me to tell me what to do or how to do it or anything. And I looked around me and it was an opportunity just to observe the people in that business. And I ended up going to the director of that contract 3 days in and saying, look, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not trying to be rude here. But I can tell you, without asking you to confirm it for me, that you must have all kinds of problems in here in terms of staff attrition, staff attendance, performance issues. Nobody knows what they're doing. And this must be costing you so much money. You must be bleeding money in missed SLAs with your clients here because this place is just crazy. And I said, I took this job as an opportunity to experience life in Spain. But for me, after what I had just left, it had to be better. And if it wasn't better, I'm not going to stick around. I'm not going to spend years in this company again, building up the courage to do the thing I know I need to do, which is leave and find something that is good for me. So I'd actually, at this point, then quit 2 jobs in 2 months. And I was
Wow.
going, what the heck is going on in my life? Am I
That's
having some
bold.
kind of
That's
midlife
bold, man.
crisis
That is
here?
bold. Yeah.
And I ended up at that point walking the streets of Barcelona for 6 months without a penny to my name because I hadn't saved up for this midlife crisis. I had moved over there for the job. Now I didn't have a job, but I didn't have savings. So I ended up paying a Peruvian lady 15 euros a week to sleep on a mattress on her dining room floor. And I was just eating bowls of pasta and pesto sauce because it was cheap. And I'm a bit of a stubborn person. I was so adamant that whatever I did next, it had to be something that was going to enable me to feel like I was making a positive contribution to the world, and it was going to make a positive contribution to my life too. And after 6 months, I did go to interviews, but it just felt like the same thing everywhere where I went. I decided, you know what, the only thing that's really screaming out to me here is to go and try and change the way the world works. So that was a very long way of coming back to your question. What's
Oh,
Vibrant all about?
it was an enjoyable way. I was so much I'm picking up on there that I want to ask you about. But, well, I'll come back to that journey, I think, a bit more in the conversation, because there's a lot of mind stuff in there that would be useful for us all to think about on the Pivot podcast when we're thinking about actually being on purpose, being authentic, following our true calling and actually questioning why we are doing what we're doing in work. So I think that's really powerful. So we'll definitely come back to that. But tell us a bit more about your company now then, now you set it up. So what does it do? How did you set it up? Give us the story.
So that in itself has been a journey, because the way that I try and achieve the end goal has changed a lot over the years. I started out with that, big lofty ambition. I always knew from day one when I started Vibrant, I wanted to change the way the world works. And that was about creating a better working world, both for employers and for employees. And I was very clear about that from day one, because I think that when we talk about things like organizational culture and we talk about employee experience and employee engagement, it has to work for the organization as well as the people. I started out and I thought, well, what is it that we need to be doing here in order to creating this better working world, in order to have a world of work in which people enjoy going to work, they engage with the work they do, people are happier, they're healthier, but businesses thrive. And that's what it has to be. It has to be both good for the business and good for the employee. I started out by doing a lot of leadership programs. I still do leadership development programs. It's just that for me, it's an ingredient in the recipe of creating what I call a vibrant workplace rather than being the full recipe. And that's where I started to step back and think, what is my goal here? I want to change businesses. I want businesses to start here, to be able to reflect on where are our problems. Is it talent attraction? Is it attendance? Is it performance? Is it staff attrition levels? Is it customer satisfaction? What are the problems that we've got? And to actually go then, right, well, what's causing those problems and what do we need to do to solve those problems? And then to influence that change so that we can look at the companies at the end and go, what did we do and what impact has that had? So around about 2019, I changed the sort of model for how I provide my services. And that was the point where I went, I'm going to make a move to, actually, I'm going to use your company name and your podcast name here, Pivot. Made a bit of a pivot where I thought, how do we actually achieve this goal then of building better businesses? And I started to do these cultural evaluation, cultural transformation programs. Now, if I use the word we, I work with a network of associate trainers, coaches, management consultants who would work alongside me. So to give an example, we went into one company. I call it a period of workplace immersion. So we spent weeks in the business, whereby what we were doing was we were shadowing people, observing them, getting a feel for the office culture, the atmosphere, the environment. We ran some workshops to try and understand, why do people take jobs in the company? Why do people stay? What makes them come to work and perform? What's the opposite of that stuff? Why do people not take jobs? Why do people leave, or why would people leave? What makes them underperform? We ran one-to-one private clinics to try and understand then as well, what's the stuff that people don't want to say in front of their coworkers, but they will say on a one-to-one basis about what life is really like in the company. And that was a much better process. That allowed us to get a lot closer to the truth about what was going on in the business. We were able to then go back to that company with a report and say, look, here's the good stuff. Here's the not so good stuff. Here's the stuff that you should keep doing or do more of. You don't necessarily have to change. I don't always think that you have to change as a result of feedback, but you do have to be prepared to have adult, transparent conversations with people about why things are the way they are. But you do, as a minimum, you have to be prepared to have authentic conversations with people about why things are the way that they are. And in that company, we then embarked on a cultural transformation program, working on some of the things that were a problem in that business. And over, the lifespan of that journey then helped them to improve their employee engagement scores by 13%. Now, if they started at 10% and got to 23, that wouldn't be a big jump. But they started at 76 and got to 89. And when you're already good, that was about going from good to great.
Yeah.
Even that, though, was not a flawless solution. And therefore, it's evolved further since then, because what I was finding was that even though I'm going into these businesses and I'm trying to help the employees to have the best experience of work that they can so that they can have the best life that they can, they still see me as a management consultant. No matter how I introduce myself or what my intent is, there will always be people who are skeptical and think there's an ulterior motive. So some of the associates that were working alongside me were getting different answers to the same questions from the same people that I was getting. And I was thinking, so who's got the truth here? Who really knows what's going on?
Yeah.
And therefore, I wanted a way to truly get to the heart of what is actually affecting people's experience of work. So This took me on a journey that started in 2019 then to develop an employee experience platform. And that was to basically provide the intel and the insight that would inform the cultural transformation work that we do then. I've actually got a big phone here. I'm going to show you this.
Oh, show me.
For anybody who can't see this, you can go onto my website, vibranttalent.co.uk, and click the tab for Mookie, and it will show you the platform. But what this does, this was built as a simplified way to truly understand how employees experience life in a business. So they get to tell us on a day-to-day basis how their work's going. They get to say if it's great, good, okay, bad, or terrible, and then what's contributing to that. So why are they having a good or a bad day at work? And they can choose a selection of mood factors. It could be co-workers or performance or well-being. What's going on that's making them have a good or a bad time at work? And they can leave a comment as well. In the
That's really
background
neat.
then, there is charts and reports with real-time information that allows us to be able to filter by date range or departments or teams and see, are people happy? Are they not happy? What are the reasons for that? Now, that's what I refer to as employee experience.
Mm-hmm. And is that in real time then, just for my understanding and for the listeners? So all your employees could have that platform on their phone at any time and they can input. For those who couldn't see what I just saw, it was a really cool dashboard with emojis. So it was, if it's managers, there's like two people that look like a manager in emoji, or if it was something else, if it's money, if it's something else, whatever it is, there was an emoji there to support that. So I'm in work, I'm getting along with my day, and then I feel something and I'm like, I want to meaningfully feed this back, but I don't want to go and have that tricky conversation. I just need it to feed in, and then I need something to change as a result of it. I just press that button, that emoji of that area, and that's real-time information that my company will then know about how I'm feeling. So it's not just like a one hit. It's not a one hit once a year. It's live, is it?
It is.
That's neat.
You used an interesting expression there, though, which is, I need something to change, right? This is one of the things that I'm trying to change about how cultural evolution happens. What we need to do is we need to cascade ownership for the lived experience in a business throughout the teams, throughout the workforce, so that people play an active role in shaping the culture that they want to be part of. So this is not about, let's overwhelm the managers, let's overwhelm HR with a load of data where they're going, oh my God, what am I going to do about this?
Yeah.
This is about each of the teams actually taking the time on a regular basis to step back and actually looking at the feedback coming through Mookie, the name of the platform, in order to be able to say, right, well, we're now empowered. We have the data, we have the insights here, we know what's affecting us as a team. What are we going to do about it? And what I do at the start is I'm very clear with the workforces in the businesses that I work with to say to them, I'm not going to do this for you, and I can't do this for you. I could be the best culture consultant in the world. I'm not. But if I was, I still couldn't fix your experience of work for you. If people want to come to work, they want to enjoy their work, they want to have a positive experience of the work they do, they need to be an active participant in making that happen. They need to lean in, they need to contribute to making the company they work in a positive experience, not just for themselves, but for their coworkers as well. And the more they do to help their coworkers enjoy their work, the more their coworkers will do to help them as well. So through the platform, we measure employee experience. Now, what we do is a cultural evaluation over a 12-week period. So that mood gauge, which the benchmark for that is employee experience, that's telling us day to day, do people most often have a positive or negative experience at work? Outside of the 12 weeks, you can drop the intensity of the pulse back then to weekly, because people won't do that daily, every day, forever. But they will do it if there's a strategy and there's a purpose to it, which is what we bring in. But outside of that, culture is not a one and done activity. It's something that needs to be maintained year round. And therefore, throughout the year, you're still getting that drip of feedback, but not so intense that it's every day. And we're still encouraging companies to have what are called those Mookie meetings. So their teams are getting together regularly. They're sitting down, they're looking at the feedback, and they're working together to maintain or to enhance the culture in the business. That's what this is about. The platform also measures employee engagement, though. So employee experience was the first part that I built into it. It was the first component part. For me, I think employee experience is massively overlooked. First of all, we have this perception that all companies measure employee engagement. They don't. The likes of Gallup will go out every year and they'll report, and they do these incredible, brilliant reports, okay, each year, at the end of each year, where they report the state of global engagement. They break it down country by country. The amount of work that must be involved in that is incredible, and it's fascinating, right? But one thing that's always stood out for me is they'll say something like, the European average for employee engagement, I think at the minute they report it as something like 10 or 11%. 10 or 11%
That's
employee engagement.
absolutely shocking, isn't it?
What the hell, right? Yeah. I mean, that's catastrophic. That is critical. If every business has got 10 or 11% employee engagement levels, wow, that's business critical. That's a huge problem. You're basically paying your people to come to work and not perform then. But there's a couple of problems with that for me. One is we think most organizations measure engagement because we go on LinkedIn and professional networking sites and we see all these companies posting their PR about engagement. First of all, most companies are small businesses. The majority of the businesses out there are SMEs and they're not sat on LinkedIn. Okay? We've got the big corporates on LinkedIn who do measure engagement, but actually most of the businesses are not measuring engagement. They're not sat on LinkedIn. They're too busy running their business and in the day-to-day operation that they're not sat reading articles on LinkedIn, reading the Harvard Business Review, reading Gallup's annual reports, etc. They're just running the business. So actually, if we measured engagement in all businesses, what would it be then? Because it's probably only the best organizations that are actually even interested to measure engagement. So if we measured all those other organizations that aren't even thinking about engagement, what would the score actually be? Secondly, though, I've never believed, and I'm not talking about any one survey in particular, but I've never believed that employee engagement surveys actually measure engagement. And I did a load of research into this with a leading university because I looked at these questions in all these surveys and I thought, we basically ask questions about every topic under the sun. And then we assume that everything matters to everyone all the time, and we prescribe them engaged or disengaged based on a load of stuff that probably most of it doesn't matter to them at this moment in time. So therefore, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of this. I remember a long time ago working with a lady in an organization, and at this point when I had this sort of light bulb moment, she had been in that business for 17 years, okay? For 17 years, she worked in a minimum wage job, part-time. And that's all she wanted. At that point in her life, what she wanted was a job that she could go and do on the days that suited her, in the times that suited her, that she knew how to do it. It didn't give her take-home stress. It gave her a bit of money in her pocket, and it supported and complemented her wider life. That's all she wanted at that point in her life. She came to work every day that she was working, and she knocked it out of the park. I was in that company for years. I never once heard a problem with her, either because of performance or because of behavioral issues. She was a role model. She was a benchmark for all of the other people in the business. She was always one of the top performers. She got on really well with everybody. She contributed to the culture. Now, for me, that's somebody who's engaged with their work. They come to work, they participate, they make a positive contribution through the work that they do. I don't
is that
see what
not
the
measured?
problem
No?
is. This is the thing, right?
Okay, myth bust for me.
If you look at the typical engagement survey, this was the light bulb moment for me where I thought, when we send out our survey, we're going to be giving her questions or statements along the lines of things like, it'll be things like, I'm inspired by the purpose of the organization. Or it'll be things like, I'm growing and developing in this business. Now, if you ask her, at that point in her life, was she growing and developing in the company? She just came to work, did her job, did it well, didn't want to grow and develop, didn't want to do other things. She just wanted to be able to do a job a few hours a week, have a bit of money in her pocket, go home without stress. Her main priority in her life at that time was not her career. Okay? I don't think that's a problem. Have you ever heard of the concept of rock stars and superstars?
No, I haven't, but tell me.
I'm trying to think which book I read this in. It may have been Radical Candor by Kim Scott.
Okay, yeah.
May have been that book. But I'm not stealing this idea as my own. I'm sharing this is the point.
No,
it
it's
comes from a book that I read. I just don't know which.
A great book, because I've had a
Great
flick
book.
through and taken some great things from that book.
It is. It's a brilliant book. So rock stars are people who take a job in your company, come to work and do the job that they were hired to do and do it well. Okay? They are the foundation on which everything else can grow from. We need people who will come to work and just do the job that they were hired to do. Not everybody has to want to become the CEO. But we have this, if you think about engagement surveys, we basically prescribe that growth and development must be fundamental to whether you're engaged with your job or not. That person came to work for 17 years. She didn't care about growing and developing. She came to work, she did her job well, and she went home. And she was a positive contribution to the culture. I don't see why that's a problem. Superstars, on the other hand, are those people who come in. Yes, they come in at a certain level in a certain role, but they want to grow and develop. They want to become something else. Okay? That's also fine. And we should encourage that. And the people who want to grow and develop, we should give them the opportunities to do so and help them to work out what direction might they be best placed to grow and develop in. That's all great as well. But in our survey, what we would have found is that we would have said, are you growing and developing in the business? She would have had to sit back, reflect on it and go, well, I have to say no. But she also in her head may have been thinking, I don't really care. You can apply that to so many things. There's also topics that always stood out for me, like I used to work in a minimum wage job myself in a contact center as a customer service advisor a long time ago. And it was, in one way, it was a brilliant place to be. And I'm using that term to be rather than to work. Okay? It was a brilliant place to be because there was a lot of young people all around my age at the time. I made so many friends in that company. We all went out after work. The social life was great. We drank together. We partied together. We had a lot of fun. We came back into work the next day. We joked about what had happened the night before. But we spent the majority of our time in that company pranking each other. We photoshopped each other all day long. The office, every few minutes you would hear an eruption of laughter across the office because someone would have emailed out that somebody else had been photoshopped and you would have said everyone would have been laughing. Am I proud of that? Not necessarily, but that's the reality of that's the way that things were. I'm hoping it was PC. Do you know what? Sometimes it probably wasn't. That's the reality of what was happening in that business at that time. So there's no point in me sugarcoating it and pretending it was something else. That's the reality. And that's what we've got to work with. That's what we've got to deal with. Now, if our survey came out and it asked me a question along the lines of, do I have a best friend at work? Which is a common question that gets asked. The assumption is you must have friends at work to be engaged with the work that you do. I would have said I've got 1 million best friends at work in that company. There was no correlation, no connection to my performance in my job because I didn't work hard in that job. I actually resented that business. I resented what it stood for in the world. It was a business that turned over billions every year, but people went home with £850 a month after tax and national insurance. They would email us out quarterly about record-breaking profits to people who were officially below the poverty line in the UK. And so, no, I didn't engage with my work. I resented the company. But I did stay in the company longer than I would have because of all the friends that I had. But all that meant was you were paying me to come to work. I was not performing. And there were a lot of people in that business like that.
Yeah. So, and this is an interesting discussion because I had 3 words that I wrote down from what you talked about that I wanted to unpack with you and ask what your view on these were. One is culture. The other one was real meaning of the word engagement. Like, what actually does that mean? And the other one was happiness. So I think you've kind of talked about those 3 things quite a lot there. And from those experiences and those examples, do you think you were engaged, or the lady you talked about was truly engaged in a way that benefits all, so the workplace and the individual from both sides, as we've wanted to discuss today? And can you unpack the word engagement for us, for our listeners? Because I think leaders can find it quite confusing.
Absolutely. So I'm going to come back to a couple of things that you've mentioned there. One is, was the lady engaged? For me, she was a perfect example of someone who was engaged, because engagement, to come to your other question, what is engagement for those who are wondering? There is a sort of misunderstanding of that term. People think engagement means staff satisfaction or happiness. Happiness is part of engagement, but it's not all of engagement. Engagement for me is about participation. Are people coming to work driven, compelled, wanting to make a positive impact through the work that they do? That's what engagement is. How do we get engagement? by building those cultures that people want to be part of. What does the word culture mean? Because I think that's an important one to talk about as well. In its most simplistic terms, culture is the way in which we come together and work together and experience doing the job. It's the interactions and the shared experience that we have. Do you know, I put a post on LinkedIn recently and I referred to it as the personality of a business. And like anybody's personality, it can either push people away or it can draw people in. And so many businesses don't nurture and tend to their culture, and therefore it pushes people away. People don't want to take jobs in the business because they have a bad reputation, and they don't want to stay in the business because it doesn't feel good to them to be interacting with that personality of the business. So culture is the way in which we experience working together in pursuit of that, objective, the higher goals of the organization. Engagement is about our people then coming to work, wanting to participate. That lady, she was engaged. I was not engaged.
Mm.
At the job that this was, when I was back working customer service role, minimum wage, contact center, I was not engaged in that role at that time. And a lot of people around me, I would say the majority of people around me, were not engaged. We came to work, we had a lot of fun, we stayed in the company longer than we would have. So people mistake tenure for engagement. I ask that question a lot to people. I say, do you think tenure is proof of engagement? And almost everybody puts their hand up and says, yeah, it might be an indicator, but you could have people who are in your company 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, who fly
Passively
below the
engaged.
radar. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And they're just there, picking up a paycheck, doing the bare minimum, enough to not get in trouble, but not really caring about fulfilling their potential and making the impact they can for the company. That's not engagement. So when I was putting together my platform, I wanted it to measure employee experience, which is the mood gauge, but I also wanted to find a way to truly prove when people come to work, how do we actually prove they're driven, compelled, and wanting to make a difference with the work that they do? So I did a load of research with a leading university to try and understand, how do we actually prove it? How do we know? Because I don't believe that we find out whether people are engaged by asking about all the things that we do to the person externally and impose on them to try and engage them. That for me measures staff satisfaction. It tells me whether people are satisfied with the things that I'm doing to them to try and engage them, but it doesn't prove whether they're actually engaged. Where we got to was, we looked at all the surveys and we thought, there wasn't one that I came across where I thought, that actually tells me that people are engaged when they come to work here. So we put together our own model, and it's backed by research from this university, and it's more about the internal stuff that proves when people come to work that they're immersed in their experience of the work they do, they're passionate, they want to contribute. It's a different type of question. It's more internal than external. So that's the second thing that Mookie measures, and it measures it through a survey. The third thing that we measure then, which I think is a good acid test and it's a useful indicator, but it's not enough on its own, is the employee net promoter score. Now, you'll know what an employee net promoter score is, Emma. There might be people who are listening who don't know what it is.
Yeah, no, explain that out.
And it basically is a statement that says, would you recommend working here to other people? So the respondent replies to that question, then scoring it between 0 and 10. And what I think is interesting is, if you ask most people what they would say a good score out of 10 is, I mean, what would you say is a good score out of 10, Emma?
Oh, 9.
Right, so you're quite high with that. You're saying 9. Honestly, I would have said 7's a decent score.
Oh,
Right? And
really?
a lot of the time when I ask people, they say 8. Okay.
I'm ambitious. What can I say?
I would say 8's a decent score. Okay. But actually, it has to be a 9 or a 10 that someone is scoring us in order for them to be regarded a promoter, which means that those people are so connected and compelled, and they have such a good relationship with their employer that without being asked to, they will be out there saying good things about the company, both recommending it to customers, but also to other job seekers and saying, we're hiring at the moment, you need to apply for this job. So what we want is as many promoters as possible. If someone scores that question a 0 to 6, that means they're a detractor, which means they would go out of their way to say, don't take a job here, this place is awful. Okay, the lower the score is, the more likely they are to actively persuade people not to apply for a job in the company. So what we do is we take the percentage of promoters, we subtract the percentage of detractors, we're left with an overall employee net promoter score, and that's a number between -100 and +100. That's basically the acid test that tells us our people ambassadors for the company.
Mm-hmm.
So I measure those three things: employee experience, employee engagement, and employee net promoter levels. We do it at the start of our 12-week evaluation. We then pulse the the employee experience gauge for 12 weeks. And we work during that time on the culture of the business. And at the end of the 12 weeks, we repeat the employee engagement and the employee net promoter mechanism to see what's changed. That's how we build a picture of what life is really like in a company. If an organization gets to the end of the 12 weeks and they can prove that their people are most often having a good or great day at work, engaged with the work they do, and recommending other people come and join the company, then I verify them as a vibrant workplace, which is, for me, the most robust evidence in the world that can prove what life is like in a business. And the reason why I built that into my Vibrant Workplace Accelerator, I didn't start out thinking I was going to introduce a standard for employee experience. I started out wanting, when I started to build this platform and thinking about how I was going to best use it to help the world, I started out putting together the Vibrant Workplace Accelerator as a program to holistically evaluate life in a company and then help organizations to improve their culture. But while the app was being built then, it gave me thinking time. And I sat back and I thought, we actually are going to have the evidence here to prove where people are happy and where they're engaged.
I do really love your ethos with this, how you're kind of tackling some of the kind of myths around talent retention and engagement. You have really, I have to give you credit, like you've really thought about it. You've created something that does it kind of is self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? You can't get away from what it's going to tell you, basically. It is the truth. Radical candor, it's the truth. And I love that.
What's really interesting about it, though, is there are good companies out there. And I am now in so much more of a happy, positive place myself because I'm able to help to champion and to celebrate those really good companies. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So we just held what's called the Vibrant Workplace Forum in Belfast. So the organizations that get verified as a vibrant workplace, my job is then to champion and celebrate those organizations and help them get the exposure they deserve. One way we do that is the Vibrant Workplace Forum, which is a place where people can come to. They can meet these companies, they can hear their story, and they can get the evidence about what we learned during our evaluation of life in the company. Another thing is with my podcast and the Vibrant Workplace podcast, we'll do exclusive episodes featuring those companies. So I work with an organization. They've just, a couple of months ago, completed my accelerator program. They were already really good. Okay. They got to the end of the program and they actually said to me when I was sharing the results at the end, we didn't think there was anything left for us to do better. They thought that they were coming on, and to be honest, there were things that could have been tweaked, but they felt like the biggest thing they were going to get out of it was vibrant workplace verification to give them, that credibility to build into their employer brand as they scale. Okay. They still managed to improve their employee net promoter score by 14.9 points across the 12-week program. But they started, I think their employee net promoter score at the start was 48. Now 50 is classed as excellent. So it's confusing for people who don't know what an employee net promoter score is. You have to remember that's scored from -100 to +100. Yeah. So 50 plus 50 is regarded as excellent. They started at 48. They finished at 63. That's world class.
Yeah.
They have an employee engagement score that started at 86%, finished at 88%. Now, when you're that good and you're that high up, it's marginal gains. It's those little, final steps that you're taking. But any improvement from 86% is impressive. They finished at 88. But what was the biggest standout one for me was their employees had 21.35 times as many good and great days at work as bad and terrible days at work.
Wow.
What we found was that they had less than 4%. It was like 3.5 something percent bad days at work. Now, if I'm a job seeker and I come for an interview in that business and you're telling me that I'm going to have what is effectively less than 4 bad days out of every 100 working days, which is basically over 5 months, Less than 4 bad days. I'm going to have 3.5 bad days in 5 months. Sign me up. I'm in.
Yeah.
Those are the companies that need to be known. I wouldn't be
Mm.
self-employed if I had worked in a company that good. And that's the point. Those companies need to be known. But even though that company started in a good place, by committing to a strategy to cascade ownership of the lived experience in the business out across the workforce, bringing
Mm.
people together to shape the culture they want to be part of. And I want to come back to a word that's very important for this podcast in a moment: inclusion.
Did you just read my mind then? Did you read my mind?
I mean, look, when it comes to that, when it comes to inclusion, okay, how do we create a truly inclusive culture? We can't impose it. We can't do it for people. If we don't have an inclusive culture, those people are not going to engage with their work. If this is not an experience of work and a career for them that makes a positive contribution to them as an individual and to their wider life, why would they and why should they engage with their work? So if we want inclusion, if we want engagement, we have to have inclusion. But for me, the best way to get inclusion is not to try and do it for people. It's, back to something, I wrote it down, something that you said at the start of the podcast was about building communities to shape cultures.
Yeah,
That's what we're
that's a
trying to do
biggie for
here.
me.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
trying to bring the workforce together so that rather than one person or one team, a lot of the time HR, all the data and all the problems are dumped on HR to try and go and fix everything for everyone. And that's not realistic and that's not fair. What we actually have to do is cascade ownership of the culture of the business out across the workforce so the teams are coming together and they're going, what's good? How do we do more of that? What's not so good? What are we going to do to help each other to have more good days going forward?
And how, just on the subject of inclusion and the community aspect of your platform, is it sort of through the lens of just the person completing it when they're on there, or has it got some kind of inclusive element to it or a community element to it your companies can also create in that space in your app?
So it's interesting because this is the third version of the platform. It's actually evolved over the
I'm
last,
sure, yeah.
5 years. And yeah, so with the first version, all the data and the insights and the reporting was locked down to admin users. With this version, we completely opened up the feedback. And some people would say, what? Are you mad? You know what? If we want to have an authentic, vibrant workplace, transparency has to be at the heart of that. And if we're saying to people, this can't be done to you and it can't be done for you, and what we're doing is inviting you into a process to shape the culture you want to be part of, well, they need to know what's going on.
Mm.
I'm going to give you a quick example of that. There's a company I worked with whereby the customer service division, what their employees were saying is, in these words, we are the dumping ground for the rest of the business. When the rest of the business has work that they don't want to do, they dump it on us. And what we were seeing is that customer service were having a terrible time. Now, what's going to happen if the people in the customer service division come to work and they have a terrible day, terrible day, terrible day, terrible day? We might not want to ask and we might not want to get that feedback, but they're experiencing the company that way, whether we ask the question or not. Wouldn't it be so much better to actually know and then we can do something about the problems? Because when we choose to just avoid that situation and ignore it, those people are either underperforming or they're going off on long-term sick because they can't stomach being in the business anymore, or they're leaving. And all of those things are costing us way more money than it would cost us to just solve our problems. Now, in that company, every other department is having a bloody great time. They're having a jolly. They're having great days and good days all the time. And I thought, this is not right. Customer service feel like everything's dumped on them and everyone else is having a great time. And I thought, what would happen if we opened up our dashboard so that everybody could see it? And then the other departments could look at it and they could go, you know what? We're
Love
having a bit,
this.
yeah, we're having a bit of an unfair experience here because we're just dumping everything on them. They're having an awful day
Mm.
and we could help them to have a better life.
Yeah, I love that. That is inclusion and inclusivity all in one. I love that. Oh, I'm really inspired. I can't tell you. I want your app for my training. I'm also absolutely scared for the feedback, but I really want it because it sounds so engaging.
Do you know what? Look, the company with the lowest scores that I have worked with are so excited to be in the position that they're in now because previously the reason why they came onto my accelerator program was they knew they had problems. They knew there were fires. They didn't know where the fires were or what to do about them. We've now built the rich picture. We know what's happening in that company. And we're looking at all the feedback and we're going, there's actually nothing here that couldn't be fixed with 6 to 9 months of work
Yeah,
and
yeah,
commitment.
yeah. Oh,
So
I love
they're now
that.
going on a journey to take the feedback, to look at the data. We've put together a roadmap to take them from where they are to becoming a vibrant workplace. They didn't get verified. And that's one of the key points that I have to make with every company. I'm not guaranteeing you verification. This has to
Mm.
become a truly trusted standard. The only way we can do that is to not verify everybody. But you take that company as an example. They signed up anyway. I'm so inspired by them because they knew they wouldn't be verified in 12 weeks. But what they've done is they've built a rich picture of what's going on. Now we can get to work. And in
It's
6 to 9
targeted.
months' time,
Yeah.
I'm going to be so excited to be able to tell their story and to hold them up as role models and go, they knew they were in a bad place. They decided to do something about it. Look where they are now.
Yeah, and that is so awesome. I've got like one last question to kind of wrap this up with you. And it's a bit of I'm just going to bring it back to that moment where you were in Barcelona, you were on the mattress, eating the
Mm.
pasta, and you knew you had a purpose and it wasn't to go back into another organization, it was to change this. How did you kind of galvanize your leadership to make that happen? Like, have you got a couple of steps or some things that you put in place for yourself, whether it be thinking, skills, behaviors, mindset stuff, anything that would help our pivot leaders who might be thinking of, I've got a purpose, I need to change something here. Like, how could they start to go about that? Because in that moment on that mattress, you must have thought, I'm not built for this, I'm built for something else and I need to follow that. But a lot of people are not engaged, stuck in work and not doing that. And that's part of this problem really around engagement is people don't know how to do it. So can you give some people some insight to that?
I'm not going to stand here and say that I'm special. Okay. I was able to make the decision to go and do what I did because I was at a point in my life where I was 29. I didn't own a house, so I didn't have a mortgage. I literally sold my car, sold a bike that I had that was, worth a bit of money, sold my weights equipment, sold anything that I could to get me started. Other people by 29 might have a mortgage and 2 kids, and you can't take the same risks. I was in a point where I just recognized I can do this. And I think sometimes you go on some of these social media sites and you see these really toxic gurus who judge people for not living their lives differently, going and getting better jobs, making an impact in the world. We can't expect that from everybody. Some people in the right circumstances can go and make that leap and take that chance. For me, I had the right conditions, the right environment, the right circumstances. I didn't need a lot of money. I didn't have anything. I cancelled my phone contract. I didn't have a mortgage. I was paying €15 a week to that lady to sleep on that mattress. So I was able to do it. That still didn't make it easy. That was very, very difficult then because the most difficult thing for me was I didn't have a reputation. I didn't have a profile. I didn't have a track record and I didn't have any money for marketing, etc. And I didn't have any experience of building and running a business. Why did I manage to make it work is probably passion and purpose. I think that if you look, there's a really good book. A lot of people will have heard it. If you haven't heard of it, it's Man's Search for Meaning, written by Viktor Frankl. Have you read that one?
No, I haven't.
Really good. It always when I first read it was it always pops up in the list of books that are the best books for leaders. And I thought, but this is a book about a guy who survived concentration camps.
Mm,
But why is it in the best books for business leaders? And I read the book and I understand why. And one of the things that really stood out for me was a quote in it that says, "He who has a why to live can bear with almost any how." If you've got a really important purpose for you and you know the difference that you want to make in the world, you can put up with a lot of hardships to get there. And I have constantly had to face battles. My business, by 2019 was just starting to really start to get going and build traction. Boom, then comes along the pandemic.
yeah.
Boom, then comes along the cost of living crisis. In the midst of trying to bring the app to market, I had 2 versions of the app that were sold to me by development agencies that never worked. So I lost all my money both times and had to rebuild a third time. The third version of the app cost such an eye-watering amount of money that I had 3 months of sleepless nights and anxiety before I could make the decision to even build it. But everything always comes back to me as, if I just go and take a job and go back into the world of work, I'm not going to be able to make the impact that I know I can make in the world, which ultimately for me is about helping people live better lives.
It's not your story for sure. And now you're in a position where you're actually verifying workplaces with your own work. I think that's pretty epic. I love all the pivots you've done. I love your passion. I love how you're bringing tech to solve a problem, but with a massive people element attached to it. This is right up my street. Thank you so much for coming on today. Where can, if leaders in my audience, in organizations, and they're thinking, I want to learn more about the vibrant workplace, I want to learn more about the app, how can they get in touch with you to talk to you about that?
So firstly, thank you very much for having me on, Emma. We need more people like you who are out there as those catalysts changing the world of work, making things better. I think anybody in our space doing the things that we do, you don't do it for money. You do it because you want to see a better world. You want to make an impact, and we need more people like you and this podcast, more people hearing these stories. So thank you for the opportunity. In terms of where people can hear more about my work and see if it's something that can help them, on my website, I've got 2 different sections. I had the website redone recently, and I wanted there to be a section for job seekers and a section for employers. I'm not a recruiter. I don't do recruitment. But what I wanted is job seekers to know where the best employers are. So if you're a job seeker and you're thinking, I want to work in a better company, if you sign up to the mailing list on the job seeker page, you're going to find out where are the companies where we can prove people are happy, engaged, and think you should come and join the company. If you're an employer, on the other hand, one of the things I would say is you don't have to be perfect to start. I always think of the idea of when I was growing up, my mum used to always have us clean the house before the cleaner came in, right? She would still debate with me she would still debate with me the logic for that today, right? But it's the same with organizational culture. People will spend 18 months to 2 years trying to fix things before they bring in an organizational culture consultant. No, I'm not very good at my job if you have to tidy before you bring me in. The process is to help you to solve your problems. If you go onto the employers page on the website, there's a link to a scorecard, and it's a little test. It takes less than 3 minutes. But if you complete that scorecard, it will give you an indication of where your strengths, where your weaknesses are as an organization, as an employer. You will also see what our Vibrant Workplace Accelerator process is, how Mookie, the app, supports it, and get in touch with me then through the website if you want to access our services. So the website is vibranttalent.co.uk.
Amazing. We'll get a link to that in the show notes for sure. And for some reason, I'm thinking this isn't going to be the only podcast we're going to do together, because I've had a lot of thoughts as you've been talking throughout this podcast, this episode. And I also think, I don't know if you do any speaking, but you're a great speaker. So I just wanted to give you that feedback on the podcast. And so I'm sure there's organizations out there that would want you to come in and talk about this more. So thank you so, so much.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, Emma.
Thank you for listening to the Pivot Leadership Podcast. For any information on anything we discussed in this episode, head down to the show notes. You'll also find my Pivot scorecard there, so you can take the test and see what your Pivot score is right now. Don't forget to like, rate, and share the podcast, and subscribe now so you don't miss out on any future episodes.